So clearly, the idea of match is more important than idea of play. So we had to lobby, we had to work hard. There were schools who provisioned 5 periods a week, 1 period a day for sports. In fact, much later, government came in with a mandate.
Welcome to the Sports Biz Show. Today we have with us Mr. Parminder Gill, co-founder of Sports Village and head of the Sports Village Foundation vertical. Sports Village designs and implements sports interventions to drive change in the health, education and empowerment of the disadvantaged children and communities. Their programs are currently impacting over 700,000 children and youth in all parts of India. Today, we'll be diving into the importance of sports and its impact on society and the youth more importantly. Let's dive into it. Hello Parminder, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me, Ananya, on your show.
Pleasure is all mine. The first question is usually to learn more about your journey. And I know that you've had a journey in IT, you have a science background. How did you switch and make the jump to sports? How do you draw parallels between the two industries?
Well, it seems like a long time ago, but let me just recall some memories from when that happened. So I think, for me, for many people, entrepreneurship typically fills in the what I call blank spaces in between jobs. And for me, it's the other way around. So, corporate jobs have been filling in my long stint as an entrepreneur, let's put it this way. So I think early on after graduating, I worked for a few years before I started my first venture, which was in IT in Bangalore, in India at that time. And so I think about 5 years at that before it started to go south, and I decided to park myself in a business school. After graduating again, I worked with the IT industry for some years until my second stint in entrepreneurship, which happened more serendipitously. Owing to a dear friend, often tell him he conned me into it. Not that I had and this was sports piece that he was running at that time. And I dabbled with it for some time before I was headlong into it, was fully in love with it because the whole idea of active lifestyle, fitness, and the societal impact that really resonated with me. So much so it became my life's work after that in terms of what we did together. In terms of parallels, when we started our venture, all of us, in fact, came from IT background, the co-founders of Sports Village. And our first notion was to build scale, build platform, build content, which IT typically does in good measure. And our first ever business plan that we created had about 10,000, and this is a school outreach program that we were wanting to launch at that time. It had 10,000 schools by year two, given this the whole idea of scaling and platform. But we actually came to execute this. We realized that it doesn't work that way. Sports is very different industry, and by the way, by second year we had done 100 schools. Just take 2 zeros off from there. And what happened was when we went to schools with our platform content, all that, they said, that's all fine, but who will run the program on the ground? And that's where we had to actually embrace the idea of being a services organization. So I think what is important is the early investment that we made in the venture was in IT and thought scale, thought content, thought remote. And because of that, we were able to build a fairly highly distributed program which would run across the country. So there are some parallels, but I think I really can't compare the two. IT is a very mature industry, and sport is still early stages, not center of the market yet, at least in India. So that's where I would put it at this point.
That's a very interesting point you put across there. Do you think that sports will take a lot more time to mature? Is that just in India, or do you see from your experience or your talks worldwide that's happening worldwide as well?
So it depends on who you are and where you're looking at. If you look at the the idea of sport as a lifestyle in India, I would say infancy. But if you walk into the large retail stores, let me name Decathlon over here, you would see them crowded, which was not so many years back. So it's not that all the people going there would like to buy the gear to play or to go on a hike or adventure. It's more of lifestyle at this point in India. So I think there are pockets where there is maturity. For instance, in India, the onset of leagues, right, before at least COVID happened, I thought gained a lot of traction in very short duration. Beyond IPL, you had at least 5 or 6 other leagues. You had media that was available, which is very much required for the whole industry to work together. If you look at education, where we have spent a lot of time, is still early stages. We have just got the national education policy that came out a few months ago in India. Now that has now emphasized that play is central to the idea of education of a child, not just as a physical education or sports education as a subject, which is those 2 periods a week that you run, but actually you can teach math and science using play. And to us, that's a more fundamental shift in the thinking. And I guess that cultural context or societal context of when play gets integrated at that level, hopefully will make the country far more aware and invested in the idea of sports. So I would say pockets of maturity, but a large open opportunities or early stage context, which are not yet scaled to the level that we all hoped, or we hope that it would be there.
Right, absolutely. Also, why the idea of Sports Village? Why the idea of a dedicated platform for the youths and maybe not another age group?
Yeah, so when we started Sports Village, the vision was very simple, which was to get children to play, right? And children, we are seeing of all age groups, even some of us could be called as children, because all of us love to play in that sense. It's a natural impulse to do that, and so I mean, for our generation, I'm much older, so we actually practically grew on streets. I mean, that's what I remember. The fondest memories of my childhood came from playing on streets with my friends, not from a math or English classroom or anything like that. And as parents, it was our experience, and the acute knowledge that our children were not going through that in the school system or outside made us more and more aware of the problem that I think we were facing, and we felt the idea of making play central or offering it the primacy it requires was an important aspect, and that's where the whole genesis started. Over time, of course, a bunch of experiments that we got into, when we hired grounds, got children together to play there in a holistic manner. We went to apartment complexes. We tried various pieces on what will stick, what will scale. Almost after 5 years, as my dear friend and co-founder and CEO of Sports Village, she says, we actually knew what will not work in this whole space, and what will work we still did not know. And that's where I think clear lines emerged for us after the initial experimentation. One was in sports education, and a lot of investment was in that area after that. And the second was the whole idea of sports marketing, where how can you get corporates or brands to embrace the idea of sport as part of their marketing or brand building programs. That seemed to stick well, and I think we spent some time, and over time it became as another line of business for us. And the sports excellence theme came in on top of that, these two programs, which is the whole idea of doing academies and getting children into elite programs in sports came as a third piece there. So this is just a quick background of, I think, what led us to start this and what was the initial experimentation.
Rightly, that was actually going to be my next question, is that Sports Village has such different verticals. Each has its own purpose. How do those different verticals sort of tie in together to achieve this one large goal?
So, the idea of getting children to play, if we keep that central, and that's our driving force, our guiding principle in whatever we have done. Now, on one side, if I map who pays for our programs, where does the money come from? So clearly, there's one segment of schools. These are private schools that fund our programs directly in a B2B manner. Then there are corporates and brands that fund our programs, whether it is through their marketing mandate for the brand-related spend, or for the CSR or social responsibility mandate, where we want to fund programs or offer quality of experience to underprivileged children. We have both these programs. And the third, the last, and that is the consumer, the parent itself, who is funding our programs in terms of where the academies and more recently the digital programs that we've launched after COVID has come, which are directly focused on that. So these are three fundamental stakeholders in terms of people that fund or pay for programs. In terms of how we are structured in terms of different lines. So schools, we call it Sports Village Schools, is the by far most scaled and deepest line of business that we have, where we integrate sport into the core education process in the school system. That mature tools like curriculum, content, assessments, program monitoring, teacher-parent training, stuff like that. We work very closely with both the state and central governments in this area. In fact, part of the curriculum committees to help them integrate the idea of play and sport into the core curriculum. So that's one big piece for us. And we believe that's very important because if you seed in sport in the primary years or formative years of a child, it remains seeded as they become adults and they grow. And over time, hopefully, the culture shift will come from this generation when it graduates and uses sport in manner is very different from the previous generations have done. The second piece for us is the Sports Village Academies, which is the whole sports excellence piece. We look at talent development, talent identification. It's basically offering a pathway to children who want to become athletes or sports persons. Work with different partners here again at different levels. The third line of business is Sports Village XP, which is our sports marketing or experiential sports marketing programs for brands to meet their marketing goals. Here also the whole idea of visible social impact is a key measure, a goal for us. And sport is a social tool in my view. And which is why, by corollary, anything that we do around it will be focused on deep impact on the societal process as well. And we work with top brands, we name all the sports brand, Nike, Reliance, NBA, Boost, Milo, HCL. So there's a big roster of clients that we have as part of that. And the last line is the Sports Village Foundation, which is to work with underprivileged children, disadvantaged communities, girls, and we have large programs here with again grants and CSR funding from the corporate and other grant making bodies as well as from the government. So this is the whole idea. But if you look at how do we map this together, how does it work? So if you look at a child's sports journey or the journey right from the time when they're in the school system and then they grow up older. So whether in the school, so idea of playing, idea of integrating that as part of that, I think comes in there. And as they grow older, they may either pick up playing at a competitive level, so the sports excellence theme fits in there, or they may use sport to engage as a lifestyle or self-actualization in some form or the other. And the fitness programs, the whole idea of getting them to stay active or give them a social context around it is another piece that focuses from our side. And over time, as they grow older, so as youth, you stay, with amateur sports or elite sports based on who you are, and some of our work focuses on that. So I think the idea of mapping this whole journey of a child to youth continuum, and how do we then our different pieces of our program helps the child become better version of herself is how I think we're stitching this together.
Thank you for taking us through that. That's definitely a very holistic overview and great to hear about. On that note though, what are the challenges that you faced early on? You mentioned that you knew some things will work out, some things won't work out. What were some of those challenges? Maybe which cities was it difficult to establish sports culture in, or that active lifestyle? What was your pitch to those schools and the youth and the parents of those kids?
You mentioned schools, and I remember when we started to go and knock on the doors of school trustees or school principals or all that. So I remember 9 out of 10 threw us out when we initially started to tell them what we did for a living, which was to, and they would say, we have a physical education teacher, we have the props and equipment, so what do you do? And so then I think we had to show them, look at a maths class or an English class. We shot videos of a physical education class or a games period, so-called games period. And we brought the attention to the idea that a maths class has content, which means if it's a period number 14 of the year, the maths teacher will be able to tell you exactly what lesson plan she would run, how she will run, and when she would test it, and how she would test it. Which is not the case in sport. You would just show up on the ground and play, if you will, or the PE teacher would do something based on what they wanted. As the structure was missing, and it was maybe it was felt that play comes naturally, unlike language or numeracy where all the investments are going. But we had to tell that play does not come naturally. It has to be taught as a skill. If as a older child or a girl or a boy, you can't throw a ball overhand throw because nobody's taught you, not because you are in any way lacking than any other child. So these are fundamental skills. Motor competence or the fundamental skill development is a right of a child to develop, and unless schools are focused on that or parents are focused on that, it will not happen. So I think this advocacy, this whole idea of approaching it just as a normal subject and offering it the investment and credibility it requires, including the time. You have 5 maths periods or 6 a week, and you have only 1 or 2 physical education periods a week, if I would compare. So clearly, the idea of maths is more important than idea of play. So we had to lobby, we had to work hard. There were schools who provisioned 5 periods a week, 1 period a day for sports. In fact, much later, government came in with a mandate saying a compulsory period every day. That happened after a lot of years of work and lobbying from our side. The second aspect, Ananya, is the whole idea of parents, and I can't blame them because they're a parent myself. We all are concerned about how our children will end up based on what they do in school system or otherwise. And if I focus on sport, I would only feel that unless my child is succeeding at it, which means they're trying at least getting me some medals to start with, I will sustain with that. If they aren't, then I would not have them play, right? So the whole focus on the extremes, either you are elite or you're not. This is a big binary there. But if you're just playing and then you're asking, well, why are you playing? I mean, and the fear is that you may amount to nothing if you did not focus on anything else. So that was one fundamental, I think, view, and that's changing a little, changing largely because of maybe in countries like India, economic development. We no more come from the idea of scarcity as our previous generation did, and we are able to grant that extra context to children to play and to learn and do things. So that's also helping in getting sport into the core societal lifestyle in some form. But I think the schools reflect society and they reflect what parents feel and do, and they do exactly what the parents want. So ultimately, it is people like us who are sending our children into schools. What do we want from what is called an education in a school, or good education in a school? And I think that's the play or sport is finding its primacy or its due in many pockets, let's say in the country, but a lot more can be done. And schools is, I think, the starting piece, and I think some of our experiences there have been very, very heartening. Positive experiences is what I'm referring to at this point.
Absolutely. So today we see a lot of these programs taking place. There's a lot of good culture that's being integrated as well into schools, and hopefully the mindset and the culture around, the attitude around sports is changing. But how do you take this database to deliver a larger impact? Does the data of having so many kids in the program deliver or cater to a larger goal, a larger impact that needs to be unlocked or achieved?
No, I think it's a very interesting question, because when we started working with schools or parents or children, see, one of the battles that we fought was that getting a medal should not be the outcome to engage in the idea of sport. Because a child naturally wants to play, and since the child never plays to win a medal, at least the starting point is not that. They just play to have fun with friends, and all of us play to have a social context around it, and we just go out and play because of that. Over time, I think some of us find that we are playing far better than others, and I think we tend to. But if you look at the idea of an outcome in a school system, the medals is a very, very elite piece. It's almost like unless you score 90% or more in math, you can't be in that advanced class kind of a feel, which I get. So we had to fight that battle by seeding in more democratic measure of success, which was fitness, engaging in sport. So we created the idea of fitness index or fitness of children, and that required data. That required data for us to measure where the children were, and if they played, did they become fitter, and the data would show. So that was one use case of how we use data to seed in the idea of fitness is an important goal, and it can be measured, and you can see a child improving regardless of the elite programs that you may want. The second piece, I think, which happened in parallel, was the idea of running these programs at scale across meant that we had to collect a lot of data, being a distributed model. we are a Bangalore-based firm, and we've had programs or have programs running all around India. So unless we have these technology platforms and data which comes in hourly, daily basis, we can't run or offer the quality of experience to our parents, children, or so. I think that has been an essential backbone of our work. And I mentioned early on, because of IT background, some of us ended up investing in that earlier. But I think over time it helped. In fact, today you would be surprised we're using fitness data. In fact, it is one of our properties that, in fact, media publishes annual health survey, which is powered by us every year on the state of health of children in India. And a lot of papers are written or articles that are written use the data in terms of what have we found in children. So that's one piece. The second, what it also allows, it allows us to correlate with the other, for instance, academic correlation of fitness. For instance, we are saying that children who play also tend to do better in classrooms. Now we have the data to prove that. We have done studies which allows to correlate the children who are playing in structured programs also are doing better in classrooms, not the other way around. And that allows us to build that positive connotation with that. We have also very recently started to measure what we call as social emotional skills, which is the whole idea of inner experience of a child. You can't see it, but there's a way to measure it. So we have tried to start to measure that, and which is an important determinant or goal from a sporting program, and we're using it a lot across, especially with the underprivileged children, because sport can play a very, very different role in the meeting the development outcomes of these children. And then the SEL or social emotional learning piece becomes very, very important.
That's very interesting. Absolutely. Especially, hopefully, the data that kids who play sports and children who play sports tend to perform better in classrooms do lure in a lot of parents and change their mindset. But on that note, what are some of those causes through which or because of which children are dropping out of sports? And has Sports Village tried to counter those as well?
The biggest reason, and I could be wrong, but my experience is that, people say children drop out when they are closer to secondary schools, or when the pressures of performance in academics grows high. But my personal view is that children drop out because they stop having fun. If it is fun enough, and in fact, my child plays online gaming along with the sports that he does. While they're coping up with the academic rigor which is required, and they're able to sustain it because it is fun. It is. So to me, the idea of fun is very, very critical, because that's a whole fundamental. So when you say play actually equates to fun. Fun is a very intrinsic element, and we use play a lot more than sport, because sport tends to be a little more regimented, elitist. Or at least the memories it conjures of athletes who go through very hard discipline and at the highest levels dissuades a lot of kids from engaging at that level of pursuit. So I think the idea of play and fun, if it goes away, the child would drop. In fact, we have a bigger problem of children not starting to play, not engaging with sport. We are lucky if they found music, math, or science, or some other constructive pursuit based on who they were. But we are very unlucky that whole generation may be passing through without playing at all, or without knowing what fun it is. So I think to me, it is a lesson for us, the people who are called as educators or administrators or policymakers, in various roles that we play. How can we continue to use play and fun as a goal? Of course, the idea of learning environments can coexist with the idea of fun. Fun is just not that I'm just sitting and giggling or laughing all the time. Fun is I'm engaged, so much so that the most fun moments are where I've lost sense of time. And those are the most engaging moments I've had personally. And to me, that's fun. And I would come back to do that again and again. If sport does that to you, you will never drop off from sport. So somewhere I think there is this balance which goes away, in my view, which makes it harder, or maybe other priorities seem more fun, not because they are more pressing, they're more fun. Let me put it this way, and which is why that happened. Which is why the idea of in curriculum, in pedagogy, in school systems, how can you ensure that the fun element continues? The gamification of it, the big lesson today, if you look at the online gaming, is the whole idea of it's fun, and I think hats off to the creators who are able to inject that, and there's no dropping off. In fact, there's no dropping on, which is happening there.
That's a very important point. Thank you for sharing that as well. The next segment is a rapid fire segment to just get your thoughts on a few pertinent factors. So the first question would be, what books would you recommend to becoming a better leader and a manager in sports?
Yeah, so it'd be unfair for me to just call out few books which I've read because ultimately it depends on who you are and what your interests are. But in a broad, my interests personally have been more in marketing, entrepreneurship, psychology, and more recently developmental economics and things like that. But I've liked books around these subjects. So I've initially I liked everything that Peter Drucker wrote because I thought him to be a sage management guru in some form. And then of course there are books, entrepreneurship. Lou Gerstner wrote one book called Why Can't Elephants Dance? It was an IBM. It was about to go broke, and he came and changed it. The whole culture changing of that, I think, had a profound impact on how can you change a large organization which was going to its ruin to one of the best organizations maybe in 5 to 8 years' time. I liked Shoe Dog, Phil Knight, Nike. If you're a sports fan, you would love the story of how he built Nike. So some of these off late, the more recent books are, there's a Poor Economics I read of Abhijit Banerjee in terms of very interesting book with a lot of data on what can countries do that have. So I think some of these books have had some impact, and I'm sure if you, based on your interest, you can pick some of this. It will just help you become better of whatever you're trying to do.
3 skills you would recommend for a better career in the sports industry?
Disclaimer, you don't have to be an athlete or a sports person to be in sports industry. In fact, it can become a liability in my view. I would rather that you are not an athlete and in business of sports, and you should treat it as a business. Give the same respect as you would give any other business in that sense. But having said that, I think a non-trivial interest, I won't say abiding interest, but non-trivial interest and enthusiasm, the idea of sport is and demonstrated by actual behavior in terms of you have done internships, you have them around the whole idea of sport, I think. So that's one important attribute in my view. The second is somewhere I feel that you should have humanistic or more societal leanings. You should be worried about the social impact as an individual. I've just seen that some of us who've stuck around for a very, very long time have had that attribute in ourselves to be able to support in whichever way we can. And the last, of course, adapting to change. Like I mentioned, some pockets which have matured, some pockets which are in infancy. The sport is changing every 2 years completely sometimes, and COVID is one such trigger. So unless you have that adaptability or agility to change quickly, it's not an industry for you. I think you should have appetite to manage. So these 2-3 aspects. Stamina, of course, I'm not saying it's a sports attribute, but it's an important attribute even as a career if you want to be in a career in sports industry.
And last question on this. One word that describes the Indian sports ecosystem according to you?
I'll give you 2. One is glass half full. But I take it as a very big opportunity in context of India. So while we haven't done a lot, but a lot can be done. So I'm taking it more positively and saying there's a large opportunity for sport or play. In fact, that's our vision as well, to use it as a mass social transformation tool.
Thank you. And absolutely last question would be, what do you have planned next for Sports Village? What are some of your targets for 2021 and beyond?
So the vision that we started out was getting children to play. So I think a vision of getting 100 million children to play. In fact, with the recent trends, especially after COVID, with the digital adoption of sport, call it phygital or digital as the buzzword could be, but there is a massive surge in the adoption of digital programming of sport. So we feel that the vision of touching 100 million lives through sport or play could be nearer than away. So we are very, very gung-ho about gaining on that vision. The second part remains that how can we offer sport its primacy as a mass social transformation tool. And on digital, I think I would also want to say that we have invested recently a lot. Last 8-9 months have been very, very interesting months for us. We have invested in digital platforms. in data collection, build content solutions around mainstream use cases, right? Right from how can you do computational thinking using play to girl empowerment or digital self-defense programs, just to give you some examples of that. So there is a massive content layer which has come in. And our belief is that this content layer will help us build those individual relationships with the parents and children, or so-called consumers, and use the data to offer that lifetime value. And I walked you through the journey of a child in sports. So I think allows us to map that fully. And I think for us this year is going to be a focus on how do we use the data analytics and digital programming along with the physical piece which has been there to complete the whole story.
That's very interesting. I look forward to that. That brings me to the end of my questions. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us. Really hope to see more kids on the ground through your programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you for running the show, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. At the Sports Biz Show, the aim is to get you the best interviews, trends and tips from the world of sports business. It will be really helpful if you could subscribe and rate the podcast. This would go a long way in helping the show get discovered and add value to more sports biz enthusiasts and professionals like yourself. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn or Instagram. Links will be in the description. Thank you, and until next time, keep the Josh high.